Welcome back to another episode of Navigating Single Fatherhood. It's a show that provides guidance and support to those single fathers out there that are walking through their single fatherhood experiences. I want you to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the J. Lewis III Motivation Channel at JL3 Motivation 0108. Also, tap that notification bell so you could be amongst the first to get notified about new episodes and motivational videos. I have the privilege of sitting with Tamara Houston. She's a clinical supervisor and she's the owner of Renewal Life Counseling. Her company specializes in working with people, helping them to navigate through their mental health challenges. I want to have a conversation with her today about the trauma that widowers face when they're dealing with their widowhood experience. Tamara, please, first off, how you doing?
I am great, Jay. Thank you for having me on and being able to just join with you again. We've had many conversations, I think, over maybe a year or so about this topic. So, yeah, I'm glad to be here and just sharing a conversation with you.
Thank you. Just let the audience know a little bit about yourself.
Okay, good deal. So, in addition to what Jay has already added, so I am a group practice owner. My practice is virtual primarily. We do some in person for intensive support. I think maybe one of the things we may be talking about today is my work with EMDR. So we'll get into that a little bit, but I do those sessions in person. I am also the founder of Healing Through Time, which is kind of that's my baby. That's like my passion project. I started my work in hospice for 8 years and thought when I left that I would kind of be leaving, the grief work behind. I get bored really easily. So I was like, okay, like I felt like I got this in the bag. Like I can come back to that at any point. And actually, I do plan to. Like when I retire from this, I'll probably be volunteering at somebody's hospice. So, but I went into private practice and it just followed. Like the grief work just followed. So it was very interesting. I actually credit my work in hospice, which was not clinical work as a social worker, but I definitely credit that to the clinical social worker that I am today, actually, because I encountered many of the same issues. I just kind of addressed them with a different perspective. So that was kind of my transition into private practice work. And so, as you mentioned, I am a clinical supervisor, which means for those of you out there that care that there are people who are licensed as a master social worker working toward their clinical license. And they have to have so many hours of, supervision. So I provide that support to them. I'm also an EMDR coach, which means that clinicians that are interested in being basic trained and how to be an EMDR practitioner and applying that therapy into their practice. I assist in those trainings. I'm a consultant for EMDR as well. Yeah, I think we'll start there. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. All the good things. So I probably should have said those things first.
You,
So my
you,
kids
you,
are here.
you know what? Listen, Tamara, the whole chief cook and bottle washer thing
Yeah.
is important because your mother, you're a writer, you're an author, you're a podcaster, you're a coach, consultant. There are a lot of challenges that come with wearing multiple hats. One of your biggest things, you talked about your passion project, Healing Through Time.
Yeah.
There's a big concept
Mm-hmm.
that things that are hard
Mm-hmm.
are related to grief. For instance, now don't get me wrong, there's grief. When someone dies, that's a different kind of hard.
Right. Absolutely.
But when you know you got a test coming up, that's grief too, but that's a different kind of grief.
It's a different kind. Yeah, absolutely.
You just talked about the fact that you're wearing all these different hats, and that's a form of grief. How do you talk about embracing the grief so that it works for you instead of working against you?
Absolutely. I think for me, like my personal kind of mantra or thoughts around that is that it's part of the journey. Like grief, that word in itself carries somewhat of a negative connotation. So it's very rare, just like on its face, the opportunity to kind of peel back the onion layers and see this. It's pretty complex. No, I have experienced and have witnessed going through the process of grief and for varied reasons that there is resiliency on the other side of that. You know, no one is sitting around waiting for like the next thing that they get to grieve. It's just that's part of living life. We're gonna lose every day. Like we just lost a few minutes, right? So
Right.
that's just how the world works. We're in it. So as long as we're here and we're in it, we're going to continue to have those experiences. And I think it's the perspective that you choose to take with that. I talk to clients a lot about this just in mental health counseling, but in grief as well, is that we do have choices, right? These things are happening in our lives, but we also get to choose how we are going to interface with these experiences that we're having. Are we going to allow them to just overcome us and we become and adopt this like victim mentality around it? And I'm not saying that there isn't space for us to welcome the overwhelm, right? I'm all for a good pity party. I'm all for shutting things down. I'm all for, those spaces. I believe in that. But I also believe that there's a time to leave the party, right? That I have to kind of make a decision about, well, okay, this has happened. What's the meaning around this? What am I going to do with this stuff now? Because I'm not completely defined by my grief moments, my grief experiences, right? It is a part of my life, and I get to decide how I'm going to integrate those things and just show up in a more resilient manner.
I remember the conversation that we had on
Yeah.
your podcast. I had the privilege of being on her show, Healing Bloom.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a part of the conversation because that's my specialty.
Mm-hmm.
I speak to people about using the grief they go through as a catalyst for them to do amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
You are a specialist in the work of EMDR,
Yes.
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yes.
Now, explain to the audience how that is incorporated in your mental health practice.
Absolutely. So, I will say, just to give a plug for EMDR, it has been a game changer for my therapy. I became trained in 2019, and it was very timely. I think not my time, but it was timely because, of course, months later we have the pandemic. What the pandemic brought out is the complexity of mental health concerns and really highlighted the varied experiences of grief. If we had to just think about and expand our definition around loss, it wasn't just about the loss of a person. I mean, certainly those things that is important, but it was just constant loss all around. So it really threw me in it. I didn't have any other choice. Like I was there, I was in it and still learning, right? Still kind of fresh, but I'm grateful for that opportunity. So in my practice with Renewal Life Counseling, I have the opportunity of I use EMDR in a way in terms of just how I conceptualize the work. I'm just going to share the explanation that I usually share with clients. This is one of the illustrations that I provide. It's kind of like if there is a filing cabinet and I open up a drawer, and in that drawer, like I'm looking for something. When I open up the drawer just got papers and all over the place. No organization at all. And so what we're doing with EMDR, the file cabinet is already there. That can be a representation of our past. The papers have already been thrown in there. That's a representation of our past. What I'm working with the client to do is let's pull out one file. Let's start going through that file and let's get this organized. And then as we go, we just continue to do that over and over again until now, when we open up that drawer, we have a more organized presentation in that file. Then when I go look for something now, there's more order. I'm not so confused. I'm not overwhelmed. Like I know where it is. I can feel confident in being able to access what I need to. that is kind of the work with EMDR, just in general with mental health. As it pertains to my grief work, it is an opportunity for clients that are presenting with some grief presentation to work on things like attachment wounds. When you get into the grief work, like looking at the research, there's a lot of research around that correlation between our attachment styles and how we deal right with like relational issues, including grief of loved ones and caregivers. That is an opportunity to look at that and just kind of stuck points as well. Sometimes we can get kind of fixated or ruminate on a particular part of the grief experience, how the person died, what I what I did or what I didn't do. And so there are negative cognitions, like the way we think. It's our what I call like our soap operas, right? If anybody is familiar with like Young and the Restless, God and Light, that's been off a long time ago, but that was my favorite one watching with my grandma. But if you've ever watched a soap opera today or in the past with a loved one, you know that there's all these stories like you don't know who's sleeping with who. Somebody died and they've been in a cave for 10 years. Like it's all kind of stuff going on, right? So there can be a lot of confusion around our cognitions, the way we are thinking about ourselves, the way we're thinking about the world. So we're looking at those negative cognitions and we're using that to kind of be the glue to take us back to when was this seed first planted, and we use those different targets to kind of run through reprocessing and of those targets to reconsolidate. In other words, to go into that file, take that file out, and let's straighten it up so that what our body recognizes now is that this is 2025. I am safe in 2025. In 2025, I did the best that I could with what I had to do with. I'm not living back 10 years ago, right? I'm not in harm's way anymore. And now I can really start to begin to build the resources around validating those points that I am safe. And when I don't feel safe, I have the resources to be able to again to adapt to that and to access what I need in order to be able to show up in a different way.
That's important because a lot of people, when they're faced with some type of grief or hardship situation, they stay stuck in the moment.
Right.
When that happens, it ends up being a situation where they justify being stuck because of something that happened in that past.
Right.
Not realizing the past can be an indicator to becoming a better future, or it can be handcuffs.
Absolutely. I like
If
that.
you choose it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Let's kind of step away from all that for a second now.
Okay.
I want to ask, do you work with single fathers, or have you worked with single fathers in the past who have gone through the widower's experience?
I have my again. I mentioned that kind of where I started in my career in hospice work, kind of leading up to my clinical experience now. So for one, I would say my experience has been varied in terms of the demographic of presentation around grief issues. So I certainly experienced that a lot in hospice, and that has to my practice now. So of course, I work with males and females. Honestly, that for me, in terms of me accepting a client around a particular grief issue, there's not too much that like I'm restricted around, to be quite honest with you. But to answer your question, yes, I do have that experience in the clients that I serve. Yeah.
Do you feel that that women gravitate towards professional help like yours a lot easier than men do?
Absolutely. I think there are valid reasons for that, though, and a lot has to do with how we socialize. I was just thinking about this earlier, and not really in preparation to this, or it must have been something I had read or something. But the thought that came to mind is like, boys don't cry. You know, something that we say to our little boys. They get hurt on the playground. Well, you're a boy, you're not supposed to cry. Right? Wipe your tears. Like we're so quick to kind of have them shut their emotional reactions down. Where a girl, that's more widely accepted. those types of influences don't change. In fact, our younger persons are certainly more susceptible to kind of taking in that information. It feels more innate to them. Well, yeah, this is exactly how I'm supposed to be. And so that young boy is now growing up into an adult male, and may, unless there's been some other experiences that have allowed them to be able to express more vulnerability, that they show up in that same way as an adult. And so a lot of, I think, what men experience in particular is not having as many spaces to express vulnerability. When that does happen, there's a stigma that precedes that they are weak, right? That they can't handle anything. What they should be able to do, which is pull it together and be an example to their family. And these are things that I hear all the time. You know what I mean? Like part of the issue, the conflict that the male client may be trying to work through is, I don't have the space to like really be able to express. And not only that, I would say the bigger issue is the language. When you don't have the vulnerability, or haven't had the opportunity to be vulnerable, then you also have not had as much opportunity to express verbally vulnerability as well. So some of the language around that is just not there, because women, we tend to kind of process um, externally, where men process internally. So there's a difference there. There is language. There's processing and things that are happening, but it's very different in terms of the presentation.
I understand that for this incredible reason because one, obviously, I'm a man.
Yeah.
Two, I have two daughters.
Right.
So what I dealt with after my wife died was, oh, it was okay for them to go. It was okay for
Mhm.
them to get, but not for me. I was at self-medicating, hanging
Mhm.
out, doing
Yep.
my thing. You know, the girls were getting therapy and
Right.
getting help. It wasn't until I hit a wall. I hit a real wall. Um,
Mhm.
I I actually refer to this as the monster getting bigger
Mhm.
because there was a time where, like I said, I could handle doing my thing and it was all right. When I
Mhm.
was sober up, that monster of my thought process of what I was going through would be bigger, which meant I
Yeah.
would go to self medicate more.
Right. Right.
And it got to be such a problem that after a while, I had to realize I have to do something about this.
Mhm.
And that's when I had to seek some help. But the point I was making in that respect is that a lot of men, what we do, if we do make the choice to
Mhm.
participate in other circumstances before getting help, and it's because of what you just said, the
Yeah.
language, you don't want to feel vulnerable. Now, it presents a powder keg effect for a
Mhm.
man because it's a double-edged sword. On one side, you're told things like you said, boys don't cry. That's
Mhm.
it. On the other side, when faced with something, your mind is exploding. At that point, you have to ask yourself, how do I manage through this? Some go off the deep end. I mean, you saw what happened to the guy in Florida. He shut up a school. You
Mhm.
know, and the whole boys don't cry concept, suck it up, keep it in, can cause a person to take extreme measures
Right. Right.
because they want to be heard. When you talk to clients who've lost,
Mhm.
how do you help them to navigate through their experiences of dealing with day to day, letting them know that hey, things have changed.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the people that
Mhm.
you know, that world may change because of social activities, things like that, connections. Some people you may not be around anymore because they were only around during your relationship. How do you talk with them about those changes?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question because as you were putting that out there, my mind most immediately went to, am I doing a lot of talking in the beginning? To be quite honest with you, and for me, the answer is no. I'm not doing a lot of talking in the beginning because what I'm hoping to do with those widowers is to offer a corrective experience, which means where they have not up to that point maybe had the space to really be vulnerable, really be raw and share, like before we get to all of this about who's not there, the change in roles and trying to navigate the whole thing, there has to be that space created. I cannot speak enough about the importance of rapport. And what I will share with that is and is always a reminder for me is working with a widower. And I recall when he first came in, like eventually we joked about this, but he gave me such a hard time. The focus was more so on what was going to get in the way. What I understood, and I think you and I are on the same page about this, is it does not have to be my job to go in there and like undo all of a client's like preconceived notions about therapy for one, right? Because people come in with their stuff, they come in with their ideas about what it's going to be. But I don't have to work so hard to like change their mind about me or the therapeutic process. I can allow space for the widower just to show up and be them, right? And just kind of allow the opportunity for there to be like an organic transition into learning language. And so then what I'm going to start doing is kind of interjecting things like I may use a certain word, like I know when I talk about grief a lot, we're using that word now, but death in particular, like I'll say the word transition. So when those things come up, I use those little opportunities to kind of like just say, well, can I ask you a question? Like really being curious about what their experience is and getting a better understanding of, well, where did you get that language from? Why did you pick that word instead of whatever else it is. So before we even get to that point, I'm hoping to be able to offer an opportunity to create a different type of experience for them where maybe in other spaces they haven't had the opportunity to talk as much, um, to just kind of sit with, like if I see the welling of the eyes, like just kind of just being able to sit with it, not judging, not necessarily bringing any particular awareness to it in that moment, just letting a person be, right? Because there's again, what's happening out there is the world is saying this is how you got to do it because you're a man. Where's the space for them to be able to do it because they're just a human? So that's where I'm hoping to join with them at first. What I then find is there being like this huge opportunity for like being able to help them navigate the simple things. Okay. I remember one of the stories that you shared was about um, people bringing over frozen dinners and then your daughter saying, like I really appreciate
Lasagna.
like yeah
Lasagna.
I appreciate your daughter for that because she was like, no sir, you're not about to keep like we're not about to keep eating this, right?
Yeah.
So it's being able to help navigate those things. These are everyday things, daily activities that are going to continue to happen. Like the clock doesn't stop ticking. It's still going. People got to eat. Kids got to get to school. You may have to get to work. So how are you just navigating the everyday activities and helping to maybe be able to access support, maybe finding community resources for that to help create some type of ease in making these transitions because they're going to happen anyway. This is the thing. Either you're going to show up and start doing some things, or as a widow with children, your kids gonna figure it out. They're gonna be like, oh, okay, daddy can't do this, so I need to figure out what I need to do. And the unfortunate part is they may not have you as their father to be their primary resource. And so what I'm wanting to do is make sure that that connection is still there. Even though there's an emotional injury here, that's not the totality of who you are. You're still capable of, you fill in the blank, right? You're still capable of doing the things. They just need an opportunity to join with somebody to kind of really flesh that out. What does that look like now? Because I'm used to my wife being the one maybe getting up, getting the kids ready. Maybe I was the one taking them to school, but somebody got to pick them up now. Like how, what does that look like now? And the interesting thing about that, the reason why I say it's really kind of a transition before we start to go deep is because oftentimes when we're talking about grief and trauma anyway, it is so common for us to think that we need to go deep fast, and that is not necessary. It is painful as it is. So someone is already like on the edge, and you're like, you know what, boom, go ahead and jump off the cliff. But we ain't did no preparation to make sure you got a parachute to make we haven't done any type of preparation. What has to happen first is let's see what it feels like to just take one step first, right? And then as they become more acclimated to doing that, then we can start talking about what resources do you need. So you see what I'm saying? How that goes along with creating the space. Let's get comfortable with this first, right? You don't know me. I'm a
Right.
stranger to you, right? Let's create this different type of experience first. Then we're going to start moving, and the things that you understand are the practical things because I'm really tapping into that man's natural kind of their natural talent, I will say, to be problem solvers. So let's solve some problems. Let's
Yes.
let's do that. I'm gonna work with you on let's figure that out first. So now there's some resiliency being built. Their window of tolerance has expanded. So now we can get in there and we can start moving up in that window to start dealing with activation of those grief stuck points and really starting to do some work there. That's how I would address that.
Do you have anything coming up in the future? Do you have anything that you're doing that you'll be able to get out there so that people can touch base and see your work?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So, I always refer the audience to Renewal Life Counseling. You can just Google that, the namesake. That's going to take you to my practice. I have a group practice that is virtual. If there is anyone that is interested in working with me around grief issues, I am licensed in South Carolina and North Carolina. I also offer intensives, the EMDR intensives, and let me just share a little bit about that. So, my normal work is I'm working with clients one on one. We have a session that's like 45 minutes to an hour, and that's the session. An intensive is like several hours in a day. And so there are packages that we can work with to cultivate something that will be a best fit for your needs over just a day or several days that we can do. And I love doing intensives because intensives allow for us to get in there and get it all done. Okay. Doesn't mean, that there's not going to be some kind of residual stuff, but we have like a care plan for that as well. So that is always an opportunity through Renewal Life Counseling. And just to hit up Healing Through Time, it's healingthroughtime.org. You can go on there. And again, I mentioned that is my passion project, something that I started actually with a grief journal and card deck. And so I have that on there to purchase. I'm actually working on a coloring book and children's books right now. And so that is it's a slow process, but I'm learning a lot in the process. So I'm glad to be working on that as well. The main thing on there I will say for now is the provider directory. Healing Through Time is my passion. It's just an opportunity for me to explore grief in a more expansive way. I have a podcast on there, but there's also the provider directory. Jay is listed on there, and it is technically a worldwide provider directory. So if you are listening to this and you offer any type of support around grief and bereavement services, you can certainly reach out to me at healthroughtime@gmail.com to get some information to put on that provider directory. It is free because my goal with Healing Through Time is to get out as much information as possible for the bereaved around varied issues related to grief issues. So you can go on there now if you're looking for a provider. Again, it is worldwide. You can find the names, the state, the pricing, all of that stuff on there. So I really love for you to utilize that as a resource and just share with your audiences as well.
That information will be in the show notes.
Okay,
So
awesome. Yay.
we'll make sure that that's there because it's vital to be able to have access to resources. And once again, I just want to say, Tamara, thank you. I really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, Tamara Houston,
Thank you.
thank you for coming back to see another episode of Navigating Single Fatherhood. I'm Jay Lewis III, and I will talk to you next week. Have a good one.